Imagine a net, not of fish, but of silence, a silence methodically constructed piece by piece over decades. In this video, I tell you a story that most Catholic media prefer not to delve into too much. And in the end, you'll understand why this story isn't just about Catalonia or Bolivia. It's about the very heart of the crisis that has shaken the Church for the last 60 years. In 2024, the Society of Jesus of the Catalan province published an admission report that shook many ecclesiastical circles. 145 documented cases of serious misconduct towards minors committed by Catalan Jesuit priests since 1948. These are not rumors, they are not accusations, they are official recognitions made by the order itself. 145. In letters, 145 victims, children, boys, and young people entrusted to the spiritual care of men who were supposed to guide them toward God. But the most shocking news isn't the number. It's what was done, or rather, what wasn't done when these cases emerged in the previous decades. According to investigations launched by the Syndic de Greuge, Catalonia's ombudsman, and the Catalan parliament itself, a significant portion of the priests accused of serious misconduct were not removed, were not reported to the civil authorities, and were not subjected to serious canonical proceedings. She was transferred far away, transferred to Bolivia. Victims groups and investigators describe Bolivia as a veritable institutional dumping ground, a country far from Europe, with fewer legal resources and less media attention, where priests with serious conduct problems could continue to work in local communities, far from the eyes of the families who had filed complaints. The questions the Catalan authorities are trying to answer are specific. How many priests were transferred in this way? Over what time frame? Who authorized the transfers? Was there a deliberate institutional strategy? In 2025, a partial response arrived in the form of a ruling. 2 former provincials of the Society of Jesus in Catalonia were convicted by the Spanish justice system, not for having committed serious misconduct, but for having covered up the cases, for having failed to report them to the civil authorities, for having, in essence, chosen the good name of the order over truth and justice. To understand the weight of this story, we must understand what the Society of Jesus represents in the recent history of the Church. The Jesuits are the order founded by Saint Ignatius of Loyola in 1550. For centuries, they were the spearhead of the Counter-Reformation, the most brilliant minds in Catholic theology, the missionaries who brought the gospel to Asia, Africa, and the Americas. They were the intellectual muscle of the papacy. Their discipline was legendary. Then came Vatican II, and something in the Society of Jesus broke. In the decades following the Council, the Jesuits became, in much of their academic leadership, the champions of theological progressivism. Liberation theology, moral relativism in universities, the systematic criticism of the traditional magisterium, the pressure to reform doctrine on marriage, family, and consecrated life. It is difficult to find a movement of doctrinal destabilization in the post-conciliar Church in which the Jesuits have not played a leading role. And then there's a name we can't help but mention: Jorge Mario Bergoglio. Pope Francis was a Jesuit. He was the provincial of the Jesuits in Argentina from 1973 to 1979. Then he became the Pope who promulgated Traditionis Custodes, who tried to bury the traditional Mass, who appointed Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez as prefect of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. The order that dominated post-conciliar theological progressivism, the order of the Pope that sought to destroy the traditional liturgy, is the same order that now finds itself at the center of one of the most documented institutional cover-up scandals of recent years. There's a second level to consider. Victims' organizations and investigators describe Bolivia not as a random choice, but as part of a network. Bolivia was a well-known destination in the community. This means, if the investigations confirm it, that multiple people knew, not one, not two provincial officials, a network, a system. When a system works this way, when institutional management is widespread enough to last decades, organized enough to require international transfers, deep enough to ignore 145 victims, then it is no longer a matter of a few individuals making bad choices. It's a culture, an institutional culture that has placed the survival of order above all else. Catholic traditionalists have been repeating it for years. The Church's crisis is not a crisis of communication. It's not a crisis of image. It's a crisis of faith and discipline. A church that has abandoned clear moral doctrine, that has emptied seminaries of devotion and rigor, that has replaced sanctity with social relevance, ultimately produces exactly this: institutions that talk about justice for the world, but fail to do justice within themselves. You can't preach mercy without truth. You can't talk about human rights in encyclicals and then treat your priests like a public relations problem. And here, something even more profound comes into play. The liturgical, doctrinal, and disciplinary reforms of the last 60 years have been sold as an update, an adaptation of the Church to modern times. But modern times have also brought with them a lowering of standards, a confusion between mercy and omission, between dialogue and complicity. Catholic traditionalism isn't nostalgic. It doesn't want to return to an idealized past. It wants that discipline, that doctrinal clarity, that seriousness in the formation of the clergy, which are precisely the things proposed by the traditional model and systematically dismantled after the Council. This Jesuit story is, in a certain sense, an X-ray of what you get when you dismantle discipline without replacing it with anything. The question the faithful have the right to ask, and which too few ask clearly, is this: how many other Bolivias exist? How many other systems of institutional management of the problem? In how many other orders? In how many other dioceses? In how many other countries? Here we are at the moment I promised you at the beginning. The web of silence. The system. Here is the connection that no one wants to make explicitly. The same society of Jesus that led the post-conciliar theological revolution, which gave the Church the Pope who signed Traditionis Custodes, which inspired liberation theology and synodal progressivism. For decades, that same company managed the protection of its problematic priests through international transfers to distant countries, far from European justice. This isn't a paradox. It's about coherence. An institution that has lost the thread of objective truth in liturgy, morality, doctrine, ends up losing it in its own internal life as well. The crisis of the modern Church cannot be understood by looking at individual scandals. It can be understood by seeing the common thread that runs through them all: the abandonment of discipline, the abandonment of truth, the abandonment of God as the center. What do you think? If you liked the video, comment, Amen. God bless you.